You know, many people still think that to stay with a narcissist, you need to be strong, tough-skinned, and unshakable. But in reality, that is not true at all. What keeps someone beside a narcissist is not courage or a heart of steel. It comes from something much deeper: old wounds, emotional habits shaped since childhood, and the empty spaces inside us that we sometimes cannot even name. When we talk about toxic relationships, people tend to focus on the narcissist's behavior, how they manipulate, how they twist right and wrong, how they confuse and destabilize others. But very few have the courage to look inward to examine why we stay, why we endure, why we become accustomed to putting someone else's feelings above our own. Often, we mistake endurance for compassion, maturity, or a big heart. But the truth is, the people who have been hurt the most are usually the ones who get pulled into this dynamic. Not because we are weak, but because we have grown familiar with chaos, familiar with striving to be loved, familiar with carrying the burden of keeping the peace, and realizing this is not about blaming ourselves. It is about understanding that if we keep moving from one painful relationship to another, it means a part of us has learned to treat instability as normal. We confuse anxiety with affection, tension with connection. So the most important question is not, why does he or she behave that way, but rather, why do I stay even when my heart is exhausted? And that is exactly what we are going to unfold, step by step, with clarity and honesty in this video today. And from that very question, why do I stay? We step into the first layer of truth you need to face. This is the reality. The biggest mistake: confusing endurance with strength. Many people believe that being able to endure a narcissist is a sign of maturity, a proof that they are more patient, more compassionate, more emotionally capable than others. They convince themselves that their tolerance is a noble quality. But that is simply a story they tell themselves to make the pain feel meaningful. The truth is far different. You don't stay because you are strong. You stay because you have grown accustomed to emotional instability. During the earliest years of your life, you may have lived in an environment where silence kept you safe. You learn to read the moods of adults, to shrink yourself, to place other people's feelings above your own. And those survival skills, the ones that once protected you, have now become the chains keeping you in toxic relationships as an adult. You think you can handle it, but in reality, you are simply replaying an old habit, doing anything to maintain peace, doing anything to avoid abandonment. Your nervous system was wired to respond to inconsistency, not by escaping it, but by adapting to it. So when you meet a narcissist, you don't feel threatened, you feel familiar. And that familiarity is the trap. From that familiarity, you easily fall into the illusion that this pain has depth, that this turbulent connection is meant to be. But in truth, it is only your old trauma being reactivated. Endurance is not strength. It is survival instinct distorted, keeping you in places that drain you, simply because that is how you once learned to survive. And instead of asking, how do I endure them, the real question must be, why does this pain feel so familiar that I believe I deserve it? Because that answer, as difficult as it may be, has never been about them. It has always been inside you. As you trace the question, why do I stay? You'll quickly realize that the root of it has nothing to do with the present. It reaches back into the years when you were far too small to protect yourself. Because no one is born knowing how to endure toxicity. That endurance is shaped by childhood, by moments too subtle to remember yet too deep to forget. If you grew up in a home where your emotions had no place, where a single sigh or shift in tone could change the entire atmosphere, you learned to survive with an emotional radar. You became the child who didn't cry, didn't ask, didn't cause trouble. The child who watched every raised eyebrow, every change in mood, every heavy or hurried footstep just to predict, am I safe today? And when safety meant silence, you taught yourself to swallow every need you had. Children like this grow into adults without realizing one crucial truth. They do not know how to love in a healthy way. They know how to love by disappearing into someone else's needs. They don't know how to set boundaries because boundaries were a luxury they never had. They don't know how to ask for what they deserve because asking once meant risking rejection or punishment. And they don't know what peaceful love feels like, because peace was never part of their world. So when a narcissist enters their life, someone intense, unpredictable, magnetic, hard to read, the nervous system instantly recognizes the emotional blueprint. You think you're drawn to their intensity, their confidence, their charisma, but deep down, you're being pulled toward the emotional memory stored in your body. You mistake working hard for acceptance as chemistry. You mistake the tightness in your chest for connection. But that isn't love. That's trauma bonding. You don't stay because they make you happy. You stay because they recreate the exact pattern of love you grew up with. A pattern that taught you love must come with anxiety, that peace is unfamiliar, and that you must shrink yourself to earn affection. And the most painful part is this: familiarity always overrides logic, until you finally gather the courage to face its origin and call the wound by its real name. When you look deeply into the stories of those who stay in relationships with narcissists, you'll notice something both fascinating and heartbreaking. The more they are hurt, the more they elevate their endurance into a kind of moral ideal. They call it compassion, patience, loyalty. But in reality, it is just a beautiful layer of fabric used to cover a truth they are not yet ready to face. They are afraid to leave, afraid to admit that they gave their heart to the wrong person, afraid to confront themselves. In a healthy environment, endurance can indeed be a virtue. But once placed in the hands of a narcissist, endurance becomes distorted instantly. A narcissist doesn't need to do much, they simply observe. They test your boundaries with the smallest of gestures, a seemingly harmless sarcastic remark, a casual blame shift, a subtle request that crosses the line while pretending not to notice. And you stay silent. The first time, you think it's kindness. The second time, you call it maturity. By the third time, you no longer recognize it as a boundary at all. To a narcissist, every moment you stay silent is a moment they map out your breaking point. They see clearly that you are someone who can tolerate more and more and more without pushing back. And so your most beautiful qualities, your kindness, your softness, your empathy are twisted into submission. They turn your gentleness into a tool of manipulation, your listening into fuel for their ego, your patience into an excuse for their lack of change. But the most painful part is this: you genuinely believe you are doing the right thing. You believe you are healing them. You believe that if you stay long enough, love intensely enough, endure deeply enough, they will eventually change. But that is not sacrifice. It is illusion. A subtle illusion constructed to help you avoid the real pain. The pain of admitting that you chose the wrong person. And only when you see this truth do you finally understand that strength is not found in enduring more. Strength lies in stopping, in seeing clearly, and in walking away. If you look closely at people trapped in relationships with narcissists, you'll discover a painful but accurate truth. They are not loyal to the narcissist, they are loyal to their own fear. They are loyal to the patterns etched into their psyche since childhood. Patterns that taught them that leaving is betrayal, is failure, is proof that they didn't try hard enough. And so they stay, even as their heart fractures piece by piece. Trauma teaches distorted lessons. It teaches you that silence is safety. It teaches you that your needs always come last. It teaches you that loving someone means enduring everything they do to you as long as they don't leave. And when you have lived inside that pattern long enough, you can no longer distinguish love from fear packaged in the language of devotion. The narcissist depends on this pattern like a power source. They are not seeking love, connection, or understanding. What they want is someone who is used to betraying their own boundaries, someone who fears abandonment more than they fear being hurt, someone who keeps forgiving even when they know deep down that forgiveness is tearing them apart, and they recognize that person in you when you apologize for their actions, when you justify their cruelty with, "They act that way because they're wounded," when you believe that if you are just good enough, loving enough, patient enough, they will eventually change. But that is not loyalty. It is trauma loyalty, an attachment born from fear and conditioning, not from love. It blurs the line between not abandoning others and abandoning yourself. And the cruelest part is that you believe you're doing something noble, that you're the only one who truly understands them, that you are saving them from their darkness. But in reality, each day you stay is another day you drift further away from who you truly are. Only when you face this truth can you see clearly. Loyalty to others at the cost of betraying yourself is not virtue. It is self-erasure, and no form of love is worth losing yourself for. There is a truth most people avoid, not because they don't know it, but because they don't want to believe it. Narcissists do not operate on love. They do not understand love the way you do. They are not moved by your kindness, not touched by your sacrifices, and they do not change just because you love them deeply. The only thing that makes them react, not open up, is your guilt. When you feel guilty, they feel powerful. When you apologize for the very harm they caused, they feel fed. When you shrink yourself just to keep them from being upset, they interpret it as dominance. This is why they constantly flip the script. When you say you're hurt, they say you're too sensitive. When you point out a boundary, they call you selfish. When you say you're tired, they accuse you of overreacting. Everything is designed to make you question your own clarity. And every time you doubt yourself, you shrink. Every time you shrink, they expand. It's an unspoken but brutal exchange between the manipulated and the manipulator. The smaller you become, the larger they feel. The more you blame yourself, the more significant they believe they are. The more you fear hurting them, the more convinced they become that they own you. Guilt is the invisible chain. No one sees it, but it binds you more tightly than any locked door ever could. It keeps you from leaving because you believe leaving hurts them. Leaving is betrayal. Leaving makes you the bad one. But here is the liberating truth. The guilt is not yours. It is manufactured intentionally as a mechanism to control you, to keep you small, to convince you that you have no right to choose yourself. And when you begin returning that guilt to its rightful owner, when you refuse to carry the emotions, the behaviors, the consequences that belong to them, what collapses next is not your world, but the illusion of power they once held over you. Because a narcissist can only manipulate you if you believe their pain is yours to fix. The moment you hand that burden back, you don't just rise, you become free. One of the hardest truths to accept is this: you are not addicted to the person. You are addicted to the feeling they create, a feeling you've been familiar with for a very long time. A relationship with a narcissist does not operate on love. It operates on the continuous activation of emotional patterns you learned in the past. Anxiety, over-effort, and the belief that you are never enough. If, as a child, you had to work hard to be noticed, to be loved, to be seen, then as an adult, your body unconsciously seeks out the same emotional landscape. You mistake insecurity for connection, a tight chest for chemistry, and the adrenaline of fear for deep affection. And so the narcissist becomes the eerily perfect missing piece for the wounds you never healed. They grow distant, you try harder. They withdraw, you chase. They go silent, you panic and search for your fault. With each loop, the bond tightens, not because you love them, but because your nervous system has learned to call pain home. You're not chasing the person in front of you. You're chasing an emotional memory, the inner child who once felt not enough, who believed that trying harder would finally earn love. The awakening here is this: the intensity you feel is not the sign of a great love. It is the sign of an old wound steering your life. And when you finally see that truth, you understand. What you've been searching for was never in them, it has always been in the unhealed part of you. One of the hardest and most painful truths is that many people were conditioned from a very early age to confuse chaos with love. When you grow up in an environment filled with tension, conflict, cold silence, or conditional affection, your nervous system learns one thing: instability is normal. So, as an adult, peace doesn't make you feel safe, it makes you feel unfamiliar, sometimes even empty. And from that emptiness, suspicion arises. You ask yourself, why is it so calm? Is something wrong? That's when you begin to believe that drama is proof of real love, that arguing is evidence of connection, that the tightness in your chest must mean deep passion. But no, that is not love, that is adrenaline. That is your nervous system locked in survival mode for so long that it has forgotten what stability feels like. The narcissist exploits this flawlessly. The rhythm of love, withdrawal, closeness, distance, warmth, coldness they create is not accidental. It targets the exact wound that makes you believe, if I try a little harder, if I endure a little more, they will love me. But peace is not the absence of emotion. Peace is the space where emotion can breathe. Peace is being seen without having to prove anything. Peace is being loved without having to erase yourself to earn it. When you learn to distinguish chaos from connection, you begin to see more clearly who brings you safety and who merely awakens old wounds. And the day you choose peace over chaos, even if peace feels strange at first, is the day you step out of your psychological war zone and into the real life you were meant to live. In the end, what keeps you tied to a narcissist has never been love. It is the unhealed part of you, the part that once believed you needed to hurt in order to deserve a place in someone's life. But the moment you have the courage to face it without avoiding, sugarcoating, or excusing it, the door to freedom begins to open. Because healing is not about proving how much you can endure. Healing is choosing to walk away from the places that make you smaller. Healing is the moment you realize you no longer have to call pain love. Your heart deserves peace that doesn't require permission. It deserves respect that doesn't demand the sacrifice of your identity. A narcissist was never your destiny. They were a lesson, an uncomfortable, sometimes cruel lesson meant to help you rediscover your worth. And when you can finally say, enough, when you choose yourself for the first time in years, you will uncover a beautiful truth. Real strength is not standing in the storm until you collapse. Real strength is stepping out of the storm, looking back, and knowing you deserve a kind of love that doesn't make you wither. When you stop confusing chaos with connection, when you stop calling hurt intimacy, that is the moment you stop merely surviving. That is the moment you begin to live.